Andy Biggs tried to lecture Maxwell Frost and instantly regretted it. What followed was one of the most revealing clashes in Congress this year.
This should not be controversial. Only Americans should decide American elections, and that means starting at the apportionment process, and that means starting at the census process. And so with that, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Who's asking?
Frost.
Oh, sure, go ahead and ask a question.
Well, because the whole first part of your argument had to do with the fact that somehow this helps Democrats. So there's a political issue here. But I'm just curious what you have to say about the fact that Donald Trump, as we speak, is actually creating more undocumented people in this country by doing things like ripping away TPS, right? For hundreds of thousands of Haitians in my district and in my state.
So here's the response to the question. I don't think he's creating more illegal aliens by taking away TPS. What does the T in TPS stand for?
He is creating
what is
more
the T?
undocumented
I answered your question. Answer mine. What does the T stand for?
Temporary protective status.
The T stands for temporary protective class. And here's the deal. Temporary parole status, that's what it stands for. And what that means is we're going to parole you in for a period of time. We have people who have been paroled in for their temporary period of time for more than 20 years. More than 20 years. And they won't go home.
So you're saying...
And I'm suggesting they need to go home. That's what President Trump's suggesting. I think that's what the American people want. And when we get back to this question...
None of the polls show that now.
I'm sorry?
None of the polls show that now. The American people are overwhelmingly against what this president's doing in immigration. In fact, for the first time in history, more people are with us
I'll take my time back. I was respectful and let you ask your question. I disagree with you. I disagree with your interpretation of what polling is saying. What I'm suggesting to you is this bill corrects an inequity. So let me give you an example. How many people are in Congress from California that shouldn't be here because you overcounted, including apportionment of illegal aliens? By some estimates, it's as high as 7. 7. My state has 9 representatives. Will we lose some? My guess is we might lose one.
The Constitution is clear that we count persons.
Okay, so from now
regardless of status.
when you're talking, I will interrupt you. Okay, is that fair? You were that rude. You were that rude. You didn't even let me finish my comment. You had to make your point when you can raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like my 5 minutes. Now, while you're doing your 5 minutes, should I just interrupt you all the time? No, I won't, because you know what? I have courtesy and respect, something you lack.
Gentlemen, time's expired.
What you just saw wasn't simply two members of Congress arguing. It was a collision between two totally different understandings of democracy itself. Andy Biggs walked into this hearing with a narrative he's repeated countless times, that the census is somehow being distorted by undocumented immigrants and that Democrats benefit from this. But this argument only works if the audience doesn't understand how the census actually functions, what the Constitution actually mandates, and how deeply immigration status is intertwined with federal representation. Maxwell Frost exposed that from the very first moment. Instead of letting Biggs frame the debate as some partisan numbers game, Frost redirects the conversation to the long-term consequences of Trump's policies. Because the truth is, immigration isn't just about border crossings and enforcement. It's about legal categories that the government itself creates or eliminates. When Trump strips temporary protections from people who have lived here for 20 years or more, he isn't enforcing order. He is manufacturing vulnerability. He is taking communities that have been stable, documented, and contributing for decades and suddenly throwing them into a legal void. Frost is trying to get Biggs to acknowledge that these policies have real human outcomes and that they create the very problem Biggs claims he wants to solve. But Biggs can't engage with the substance. Instead, he pivots into a condescending quiz about what the T in TPS stands for, as if the issue is a vocabulary test rather than the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. This is a very common maneuver in bad faith political debate. When the facts are inconvenient, shift the focus to definitions and try to score rhetorical points. But Frost answers immediately and correctly, and then Biggs exposes something even more telling. He insists that people who have been here temporarily for 20 years should just go home. Think about that. 20 years is long enough to build a family, buy a house, run a business, raise children who are U.S. citizens. Biggs is treating people like disposable tools who can be discarded after the country has extracted their labor. That's not policy. That's dehumanization dressed up as legal purity. Then Frost brings in polling, real public sentiment, because the American public does not want mass deportations. And for the first time in history, the public is rejecting the hardline immigration messaging that Trump and Biggs rely on. Instead of engaging with this data, Biggs simply declares that Frost is wrong without presenting any evidence. Notice what's happening. Frost is operating on facts, history, and constitutional text, while Biggs is relying purely on assertion and emotion. But the clash reaches its peak when the discussion turns to representation, to who gets counted in this country. Frost cites the Constitution directly. The census counts persons, not citizens. That's not a democratic talking point. That is the core of how this country was designed to measure population for representation. The founders knew that the census had to be universal, regardless of citizenship, because representation is based on people living in a district, using public services, participating in the economy, and existing under federal law. But Biggs rejects that foundational principle, arguing that states like California have too many representatives because they include undocumented immigrants in the count. This is not a policy disagreement. It's an attempt to redefine representation itself. And that's why Frost becomes sharp, pushing back forcefully. Not because he's being rude, but because the stakes are enormous. If the census becomes a citizenship test, millions of people, many of whom raise American children, pay American taxes, and live American lives, would effectively disappear from political representation. Their communities would lose funding, their districts would shrink, their voices would vanish. And the country would move one step closer to a system where only certain lives are counted. When Biggs lashes out, accusing Frost of lacking respect, it's projection. What he really means is that Frost refused to play along. Frost refused to let him hide behind rhetorical games, refused to let him reshape constitutional reality, and refused to let him dehumanize immigrants without challenge. Frost demanded accountability, and that's what Biggs interpreted as disrespect. But viewers should take away something bigger from this exchange. Immigration debates aren't just about border crossings or legal terminology. They are about power. Who gets counted, who gets represented, who gets to belong, and who this country chooses to recognize. Frost wasn't just arguing with Biggs. He was reminding the audience that democracy depends on acknowledging every person within our borders, not just the people politicians find convenient. And he was reminding us that policies aren't abstract. They reshape lives, they define futures, they decide who matters. This is why moments like this matter, because when the rhetoric is stripped away, what remains is the fundamental question of what kind of country we want to be, one that counts people or one that erases them. If you want more breakdowns that cut through the noise, expose the politics behind the performance, and center the human beings affected by these decisions, make sure you're subscribed to Left Lens. More deep dive analysis is on the way.